Hello everyone and welcome to my channel YNR Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The chaos in Genoa City ignited the moment a vicious, untraceable rumor spread like wildfire. Victor Newman was allegedly pushing Sienna to end her pregnancy, a rumor so explosive, so morally shocking, that it brought the entire Newman family to its knees and left Noah in a state bordering on emotional collapse. It began quietly, whispered by an unnamed source close to Matt, someone who claimed Victor had cornered Sienna behind closed doors at the ranch, warning her that carrying Noah's child would destroy everything the Newmans had built, that bringing a baby into the mix, especially one tied to a woman as volatile and secretive as Sienna, was a direct threat to the empire he'd spent a lifetime constructing. But in typical YNR fashion, the truth was far messier, far more layered, and far more painful than any simple accusation could capture. Victor had indeed summoned Sienna in a cold, clipped tone, to discuss the future, he'd said. But what happened in that conversation became twisted, exaggerated, weaponized by those who wished to exploit the fragile fractures within the Newman clan. When word reached Noah, it hit him like a physical blow. He'd been fragile already, his trust eroded by Sienna's past lies, her mysterious connection to Matt, and the endless tug-of-war between loyalty and fear that had plagued their relationship. But the idea that his own father, the man who taught him strength, legacy and survival, would interfere in the most deeply personal decision of his life, that Victor would dare attempt to influence whether Noah's child lived or didn't, was too much for him to process. He confronted Sienna first, trembling, breathless, nearly incoherent as he begged her to tell him what really happened. Sienna, already shaken from her earlier encounter with Victor, tried to explain that the patriarch hadn't threatened her. He'd warned, he'd pressured, he'd lectured with the cold precision of a CO, not a monster, but his words had carried a weight she couldn't pretend didn't pierce her to the bone. Victor had told her point-blank that the Newman family could not afford another unstable variable, that Noah was too emotionally vulnerable to be tied for life to someone whose loyalty could not be guaranteed, and that raising a child in chaos was worse than not having one at all. To Victor it was strategy. To Sienna it felt like a command. To Noah it sounded like a betrayal of the highest order. The moment the words left Sienna's lips, Noah's world detonated. He stormed to the ranch in a fury no one had seen from him before, not even during his darkest downward spirals after past heartbreaks. Victor stood tall, unflinching, insisting he had done nothing wrong, that he had merely presented options, and encouraged Sienna to think about what kind of future she was capable of providing. But Noah saw through it, saw the manipulation, the power play, the attempt to exert control over yet another generation of Newmans. Their argument escalated, voices ricocheting through the ranch hallways until Nikki, shaken and pale, rushed in to separate them. She feared not for Victor's physical safety, but for the spiritual unraveling of yet another one of their children. Nikki knew this pattern too well. Victor's heavy-handed interference, the emotional fallout, the fractures left behind like shattered glass no one bothered to sweep up. Meanwhile, Sienna found herself isolated, suffocating under the pressure of the rumor, the judgmental stares, the silent accusations from Genoa City residents who believed she would be the one to weaponize a pregnancy for control. She retreated to the Grand Phoenix, where her panic grew with every hour, her mind spinning between love for Noah, fear of Victor, and terror of making the wrong choice. Even those who sympathized with her, Sharon, Elena, even Summer, could see Sienna teetering on an emotional edge. The situation worsened when Matt inserted himself with perfect opportunism, claiming he had proof that Victor intended to sabotage the pregnancy by coercing Sienna into making a permanent decision. Noah didn't want to believe Matt, but the seed was already planted, and doubt spread like poison. Victor lashed out publicly, labeling the rumor a calculated attack orchestrated by someone seeking to destabilize the Newman empire. Yet the more he denied, the more people whispered, and the more the rumor grew into an unstoppable force. At society, an entire table of onlookers froze when Sienna entered, each person assuming they knew the truth, none realizing how deeply Sienna was suffering. Sharon tried to intervene gently, pulling her aside to offer compassion rather than judgment. She reminded Sienna that no one, not Victor, not Noah, not anyone, could dictate what she did with her own pregnancy, and that any pressure placed on her was unacceptable. Sharon's words, tender and steady, became the first anchor Sienna had felt in days. But Noah remained lost, torn between protecting the woman he loved and fighting back against the father who had always overshadowed him. His helplessness deepened when the rumor hit GC Buzz, turning the private Newman battle into a public scandal. Headlines insinuated that Victor Newman, the ruthless titan, had attempted to strong-arm a pregnant woman into making a Newman-approved choice, with Sienna painted as the terrified victim. Victor exploded. He threatened lawsuits, he demanded retractions, he summoned Michael Baldwin to strategize. But the court of public opinion had already taken hold. Even Victoria and Nick questioned him. Had he gone too far? Victor insisted his intentions were misunderstood, that he would never force anything on anyone, but even his own children doubted him. For the first time in years, Victor looked genuinely shaken, realizing the rumor had not only damaged his reputation but had also damaged Noah, possibly beyond repair. Noah withdrew from everyone. He stopped answering calls. He stopped going to work. He disappeared into a fog of guilt, heartbreak, and confusion, feeling like a child again under Victor's suffocating shadow. Sienna tried to reach him repeatedly, but each time she came close, Noah pulled away, terrified that loving her meant dragging her deeper into Newman chaos. Finally, the breaking point arrived when Sienna collapsed from stress and had to be rushed to Memorial Hospital. Doctors assured her the pregnancy was still viable, but warned her that emotional distress could cause complications if it continued. When Noah arrived at her bedside, seeing her pale and trembling, something in him snapped into clarity. No rumor, no father, no legacy was worth losing her or their child. He apologized through tears, begged her to tell him what she needed. Not what Victor wanted, not what the world expected. Sienna, exhausted and overwhelmed, admitted she needed Noah to choose her without fear and without hesitation. For the first time, Noah chose Sienna over Victor. He issued an ultimatum to his father: step back completely or lose him forever. Victor, shaken by the seriousness in Noah's voice, realized he had pushed too far. He tried to justify his actions as protection, strategy, love twisted into control, but Noah refused to hear it. The rumor that Victor had tried to force Sienna into ending the pregnancy exposed something far deeper. A man who had never learned that love without control was still love. In the end, Sienna and Noah left the ranch together, united, wounded, but determined to protect their child and their future from the Newman machinery. Victor stood alone in the doorway, watching the son he had once lifted onto his shoulders walk away, not just from the ranch, but from the only world Victor had ever known. Whether the Newmans would recover from this scandal remained to be seen, but one truth echoed across Genoa City. The rumor had changed everything, exposing fractures that could no longer be ignored, reshaping loyalties, and setting the stage for the next devastating chapter. What happened in the days after Noah and Sienna walked away from the ranch became one of the darkest, most divisive chapters Genoa City had witnessed in years. A chapter drenched in tension, whispered accusations, and an emotional fallout that rippled through every corner of the Newman empire until even those far outside the family felt the tremors. Victor, normally the unshakable center of every storm, found himself surrounded by silence, not the respectful kind but the accusatory quiet that descends when everyone in a room is afraid to speak the truth aloud. Nikki tried to reason with him gently, her voice trembling as she begged him to understand the damage his choices had caused. But Victor, stubborn, proud, haunted by the ghosts of the children he believed he had failed, could not see past his own certainty that his actions had been justified. He insisted the rumor was a fabrication, a smear campaign designed to weaponize his protectiveness and turn it against him. But deep down, beneath layers of denial and pride, Victor felt a creeping dread that in trying to protect Noah from heartbreak, he had instead become the source of it. Meanwhile, Noah and Sienna retreated into the quietest corner of the Grand Phoenix, trying to rebuild some semblance of stability after the emotional warfare they had just endured. But peace was fragile. Every knock on the door, every notification on their phones, every whisper in the hotel hallway sent a jolt of panic through Sienna's already shaken nerves. She feared Victor's influence, feared Matt's manipulations, feared the weight of a world that seemed determined to wrench control out of her hands. Noah, for all his desperate promises, struggled under the crushing guilt that he had not defended her sooner, that he had allowed the rumor, true or not, to infect their lives so deeply. At night, when Sienna finally drifted to sleep, exhausted from tears and anxiety, Noah sat awake staring at the ceiling, asking himself the question he had avoided for years. Was he strong enough to stand against his family permanently? Complicating everything further was the shocking discovery that someone had anonymously leaked a confidential hospital record hinting that Sienna had asked about pregnancy counseling options days before Victor's confrontation. Sharon, who saw the leaked document at the coffeehouse on someone's tablet, immediately feared how it would be twisted, because she knew Sienna had simply been asking questions, terrified and uncertain, wanting information and clarity, not control. But the gossip mill spun it differently, that Sienna had been pushed, pressured, possibly coerced. The idea of Victor Newman influencing such a decision sent shockwaves across Genoa City. People who had never dared speak against him before found themselves whispering in corners, exchanging theories, repeating hearsay as if it were gospel. Victor's enemies used the situation mercilessly. Adam hinted to anyone who would listen that his father's so-called family values were nothing more than sophisticated manipulation. Victoria quietly told Nate that this scandal could permanently weaken their father's reputation. Even Jack Abbott, who rarely involved himself in Newman reproductive drama, couldn't resist a pointed comment during a tense business meeting, prompting Victor to storm out with a fury that rattled Jabot's entire executive floor. Yet the person most deeply affected was not Victor, not Sienna, and not even Noah. It was Nikki, who watched her family rip itself apart with heart-stopping clarity. She confided in Lauren that she feared the rumor wasn't entirely untrue. Not because Victor would force something so cruel, but because Victor had a way of pushing people until they felt they had no choice. Nikki cried alone late into the night, clutching a framed photo of Noah as a child, mourning the innocence he had lost and the fractures now carved into the family. She begged Victor to apologize, to reach out, to mend the damage before it became irreversible. But Victor refused. Every time Nikki tried, he deflected, insisting Noah had overreacted, that Sienna had exaggerated, that the world was overrun with people desperate to tear him down. He told himself these lies so often he almost believed them, almost. While Victor spiraled into denial, Matt capitalized on the chaos with a precision that bordered on sociopathic brilliance. He approached Sienna privately, hinting that he could protect her from the Newmans, that he had connections, knowledge, leverage. He claimed he had evidence that Victor had approached a third party, someone in the medical field, to discuss options regarding Sienna's pregnancy. Noah nearly punched him when he heard. Matt simply smirked, knowing he had planted the seed. And that seed grew. Sienna found herself questioning everything. Had Victor really just given her a warning? Or had he intended something far more sinister? Her therapist suggested that trauma, fear, and rumor could distort memory. Sharon suggested that Victor's cold demeanor may have made his words feel harsher than they were. But Sienna couldn't shake the echo of Victor's voice. Firm, authoritative, unforgiving. Telling her that bringing a child into this mess would destroy Noah's future. Those words replayed in her mind on a brutal loop. Tensions reached a breaking point when a GC Buzz reporter cornered Sienna in the hotel lobby, shoving a microphone in her face and demanding she tell the truth about Victor. Noah stepped between them, but the damage was done. By that evening, social media was ablaze with hashtags questioning Victor's morality, painting Sienna as a victim and Noah as collateral damage in a decades-long pattern of Newman manipulation. Victor, in an uncharacteristic display of desperation, called a press conference to set the record straight. Nick begged him not to. Victoria warned him it would only make things worse. But Victor, fueled by rage and pride, stood behind a podium and declared that any rumor claiming he pressured Sienna was a disgusting lie, an attack meant to dismantle his family from the inside. He condemned the cowards spreading the rumors and vowed legal revenge. Unfortunately, someone in the crowd demanded to know why Sienna left the ranch crying. Victor faltered. For the first time in public memory, Victor Newman did not have an immediate answer. Reporters caught the hesitation. Cameras zoomed in. The footage went viral within an hour. At the Grand Phoenix, Sienna watched the press conference with shaking hands. Hearing Victor call her a liar shattered something inside her that she hadn't even realized was fragile. Noah held her as she sobbed, but even he could feel it, the widening chasm between their worlds. Sienna no longer trusted the Newmans, and Noah no longer trusted that his family would ever accept the life he was trying to build. He made a decision that night, a decision that would change everything. He packed their bags and told Sienna they were leaving Genoa City temporarily, just long enough to clear their minds and shield themselves from the chaos. Sienna hesitated, terrified of leaving her support system, but Noah promised he would protect her, protect their baby, protect their peace. They checked out quietly at midnight. The next morning, Nikki woke to a note slipped under her door. A note from Noah, explaining through tears and heartbreak that he needed space. Nikki collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, realizing her family was falling apart in ways she could no longer mend. Victor entered the room moments later, finding his wife crumpled and inconsolable, and for a brief, fleeting instant the mask cracked. He held Nikki, feeling her tremble against him, and he whispered her name like an apology he could not fully voice. When she shoved the letter into his hands, he read Noah's final line twice, then a third time, each repetition carving a deeper wound in his chest. "Dad, please don't try to find us until you learn how to let go." For Victor, the words were more devastating than any public scandal, any business failure, any betrayal, because they came from a son who had finally given up on him. Across town, Sharon and Nick met at Crimson Lights to process the news. Sharon worried for Noah's emotional stability. Nick worried for Victor's. Neither knew how to stop the war unfolding around them. Even Summer, who rarely involved herself in Noah's romantic catastrophes, found herself shaken, unsure whether to support the family or acknowledge the pain Sienna had endured. When she confronted Victor privately, asking him whether he regretted anything he'd said or done, Victor didn't answer. His silence said more than any denial could. Days passed. Genoa City buzzed with speculation. The Newman family walked on eggshells, unsure how to address the gaping absence Noah and Sienna had left behind. But beneath all the noise, all the scandal, all the fractured loyalties, one unspoken truth hovered like a storm cloud, that no matter what the facts were, no matter how the rumor began, no matter who twisted what, something irreversible had happened. A line had been crossed in the family. Trust had been shattered. And the return of Noah and Sienna, whether weeks or months later, would not come with forgiveness, but with consequences that would reshape the Newman dynasty forever. In the days that followed Noah and Sienna's disappearance from Genoa City, the emotional devastation only deepened, spreading through the Newman family like a quiet poison no one could detoxify, and each person felt the absence of Noah in their own unique, aching way. Nikki couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls of the ranch late at night, pausing outside Noah's old room as if expecting him to walk out any second, half hoping this was all just a nightmare she could shake herself awake from. Victor, meanwhile, threw himself into work with a cold, relentless focus that unsettled everyone at Newman Enterprises. His meetings shorter, his temper sharper, his silence more suffocating than any outburst could have been. Every now and then, in the solitude of his office, his eyes drifted to the framed photo of Noah on his first day working at Newman, and the faint flicker of regret crossed his face before he buried it under another layer of pride and denial. Victoria tried to reach out to her parents, but even she felt the tension, the fracture, the unspoken truth that something in their family had been damaged in a way that couldn't simply be ironed out. Sharon, the one who understood Noah best, spent every spare moment worrying, convinced that Noah's emotional state was more fragile than he'd ever admit, especially now that he was burdened with the weight of protecting Sienna and their unborn child entirely on his own. And Sienna, wherever she and Noah had gone, felt the pressure too, awakening each morning with a mixture of dread and hope, wondering whether they had escaped or merely postponed the inevitable reckoning with the Newman Empire. Her dreams were haunted by Victor's voice, by the fear that he might track them down, by the uncertainty of whether their child would grow up in safety or under the shadow of constant pressure. Noah tried to reassure her, but even he felt the guilt, the pull of home, the ache of walking away from the family that had shaped him. He wanted to protect Sienna, but he also wanted answers only his father could give. Meanwhile, back in Genoa City, GC Buzz found a new lead that reignited the scandal. A witness claiming they had overheard Victor's tense conversation with Sienna at the ranch. They didn't hear everything, but they heard enough to reopen the debate citywide. This new development sent shockwaves once more through the Newman family and left Victor standing on the edge of a deeper crisis. Not one created by his enemies, but by himself. And somewhere far from Genoa City's relentless noise, Noah looked out a window into the distance, wondering if going back to face the storm was inevitable.